Slides, you are?
She's driving.
سليمان تقدر تعطيني بس
Fadwa, is Jess on?
Sorry.
Jess, are you on? Jess? Where are you, Jess?
She was on though.
Yeah, well, I think she's also managing it.
So now, Raymond, you are going to go through the slides, or who moved the slides, me or you, or the speaker?
Yes, I will. Kristen will go first. Kristen Brady is with FHI, and they were the prime on this. And they'll speak first, then myself, then Jess, then you.
So now, if I move the arrows, the arrows will move the slides, or no? No. Oh, okay.
Yes, you can use the arrows to move the slides during your presentation.
Oh.
The up and down arrows in the left-hand corner.
Oh, yeah, they were.
Yes, perfect. Okay, and Jess, you're back on?
Yes.
I am. Sorry about that. I lost Wi-Fi, so they've connected me to the internet.
Oh, gosh.
Yeah.
All right, we got to get rolling, Jess. We're a little bit late.
Thank you, everyone. We're going to get started now.
Good morning and good afternoon. My name is Kristen Brady, and I am the Project Director for Youth Power Action. We are very excited today to have the opportunity to present to you the Youth Compass. The purpose of today's webinar is to provide an overview of the Youth Compass and understand how USAID and its implementers can use it. Specifically, we will be facilitating an understanding around the Youth Compass's conceptual framework, strategic process, and how to best prepare for, use, and adapt it. We have about 35 minutes of a presentation, which will be followed by a 10-minute discussion from our guest, from Fadwa Abdelkader, who is a Gender and Social Inclusion Specialist from Youth Power Jordan, who piloted Youth Compass. We will then have 15 minutes for Q&A. Before we get started, I wanted to introduce our two presenters. Ramon is MSI's Youth Practice Area Leader and led the design and development of the Youth Compass. He specializes in organizational performance improvement and possesses a number of competencies that have allowed successful contributions across a broad range of technical areas and sectors. Jess No is a technical manager at MSI and co-designer and writer of the Youth Compass. She also serves as community manager for Peace Exchange, a community of practice developed in the USAID Conflict Technical Capacity Building and Training Project. Before joining MSI, Jessica worked at the World Bank supporting the South-South Knowledge Exchange Trust Fund. We're delighted to have Ramon and Jess get us started.
Thanks, Kristen. And I'd also like to thank USAID Youth Power Learning and Making Sense for hosting today's event. I'd also like to thank everybody that's online participating today. We are, to say the least, very excited to be talking with you this morning about this new USAID Youth Power Action tool. To kick off, we'd like to briefly provide some context and frame the tool a bit. So, very quickly, there are four major elements that we'd like to highlight that guided the development of the Youth Compass. First was USAID's call to design the next generation of assessment tools. And what we mean by that is they wanted a tool that was flexible and that could be used by missions or implementers across what we consider the activity cycle. So from the early design and formation of an activity all the way through to its implementation and even evaluation. Second, they wanted us to look at, of course, past assessments, in particular the Equip 3 Guide to Cross-Sectoral Youth Assessments, as well as Youth Map. And they wanted us to touch base with all of the rich and robust experience and knowledge in the youth field from youth implementers. Third is, of course, our guiding Youth Power USAID staff under the guidance of Elizabeth Berard, which included also specialists from Global Health, E3, DRG, and Gender. And then finally, we had the great opportunity to pilot the Youth Compass in two USAID projects, one in Jordan, implemented by Global Communities, and the other in Indonesia, implemented by RTI. So we'd like to begin this webinar with two simple questions. One, what does the Youth Compass do? And two, what activities can it be used upon? Clearly, as seen on the slide, its purpose is to strengthen a youth activity at whatever stage it's at, and to maximize achievement of results, scale, and sustainability. If it's in the design stage, of course, we're focusing on putting together a solid design to then be to then put out as an RFA or an RFP or a task order. If it's from the implementing partner's point of view, it could be presenting a proposal or getting involved in implementation to strengthen its likelihood of achieving results. And second is the use. What activities can it be used upon? We consider that this Youth Compass is quite flexible in terms of where and how it's used. But in particular, we see three areas, or three beneficiaries per se. The first is youth as unique or major beneficiaries. Second is if youth are part of a beneficiary group, so you have some type of workforce or global or health project that focuses both on adults and youth. And third is where youth are indirect beneficiaries or implied beneficiaries, whereby we focus, a project is focusing on, for example, secondary education policy and teacher training. So clearly the end user of that effort is going to be young people. And in all cases, the Youth Compass is valuable. Okay, let's talk quickly about the structure. The Youth Compass really consists of what we consider a strategic process, which can be seen in the outermost circle in the compass dial there, step 1, step 2, step 3, and the conceptual framework, which is the inner part of the circle. And we see 4 areas there: beneficiaries, enabling environment, youth participation and empowerment, and gender equality and social inclusion. These 2 elements, the strategic process and the conceptual framework, are the engine of the Youth Compass and give it what we consider life. Okay, so without getting too deep into the details here, I'd like to just provide an overview of the strategic process, which was really influenced and informed by the discipline of strategic management and to some extent organizational development. We aimed to make this Youth Compass user-friendly and simple, and we organized it by steps and tasks. Okay? In step 1, we see kind of the broad step 1, we see where the Youth Compass allows and provides assessment. We look for weaknesses, we look for strengths, and we look for opportunities in that group of tasks. In step 2, we see what we consider strengthening actions. We're trying to identify and prioritize evidence-based strengthening actions that stem from the assessment that was conducted in step 1. And then finally in step 3, we have the implementation or the integration and action of these strengthening actions. It's important to note here that what we really try to do with the compass is we try to be conscious of not having the outputs of this tool be standalone. So we really focused on how can we integrate whatever strengthening actions, whatever recommendations are put forward, how can we integrate that into already existing processes, deliverables, systems that are part of either USAID missions or USAID implementers' efforts. We'll provide a few more details on the tasks shortly. Okay, let's talk about the conceptual framework. Remember, that's the inner part of the ring. This conceptual framework consists of both standards, consists of standards that together provide a common thread of understanding across all 7 of the compass tasks and allow it to be put into practice. And as you see there, it's this conceptual framework is informed by 3 development approaches. Most importantly and most significantly, positive youth development, Then we have cross-sectoral coordination and, of course, gender equality. What we see here in this conceptual framework is, as I said, it's composed of these four areas: beneficiaries, enabling environment, participation and empowerment, and equality and social inclusion. Each area has a definition and an overarching question that kind of bring it to life. So, for example, for beneficiaries, we ask the question, how is the activity's target beneficiary groups identified, right? Is it well understood? Is there demographics? Is there status, socioeconomic status, well defined and understood? Enabling environment. How can the activity achieve and sustain its results through improving the enabling environment affecting youth? So we're looking there for systems and social normative, structural and physical aspects within those systems. Youth participation and empowerment, that area. We ask, how does the activities, approaches, and interventions facilitate youth participation, decision-making, skill building, and positive contribution to society? That area, that third area, really is the manifestation of positive youth development. So not only is positive youth development weaved into all of these, but in a sense, it's a standalone in one of our areas. And then finally, gender and social inclusion. And we ask the question, how does the activity use an inclusive approach to promote equal rights, responsibilities, and benefits for young women and men, regardless of their age, sexual orientation, disability status, etc. Okay? Let's take a quick look now. Let's go back to our strategic process, and this table kind of summarizes all of our tasks. And as I said, each task has a purpose, and each task has an exercise. So under step 1, we have task 1, and we begin with the results, the desired results, the framed results that surround this activity, with whatever stage it's in. Okay? Once we begin that, and that serves as the analytic frame, then we move to task 2. And task 2 is really the heart and soul of the guide, and it's where we have a group of questions that need to be responded to for each of the 4 areas. If we could move quickly ahead, this is kind of a quick example. I know it's quite small, but this is an example of one of the areas in beneficiaries and what task 2 looks like. So you see there's a definition. We define what we mean by beneficiaries. There's an overarching question. And there's a number of follow-up questions that need to be answered. When I say need to be answered, I should say the implementer or the missions can select what they feel are most important. And there's also space in the compass for design of their own questions. We look to get findings for those questions, and if they can't be answered, we note in further research that it needs to be, we don't have the answer, and we need to find that answer. So if we can go back. Once we finish with task 2, we go to task 3, where we can conduct further research. That is, if we found that for some of these questions or in some of these areas that we need to conduct more significant primary or secondary research, we do so. That's the task that allows that to occur. And then we move to step 2, which is consisting of task 4 and task 5. Task 4 and task 5 are really about identifying, validating, and then prioritizing what we consider strengthening actions. And of course, these actions are developed based on evidence, concrete evidence that we've achieved and gleaned in step 1. And then we have step 3, where we share and act. And again, this is, we're looking to give back the information from where we got it from. We're looking to integrate it into what already exists, not standalone and parallel systems or products. And we're looking to act upon it. And there's a guide that allows that to happen. Okay, so that's kind of a rapid and brief overview of our tasks. We can move 2 slides ahead, and I'll rapidly go through our intended audience and timing. So if we could move one more slide, and basically the Youth Compass was designed primarily for USAID missions and implementing partners. However, we feel that this guide can easily be used outside of USAID, the USAID donor context, and it can be relevant for a number of other donors and their implementers or their implementers. So, and the way that this youth compass is designed, it's kind of a off-the-shelf guide that anyone can get a hold of and work through. So it's not that there needs to be significant orientation to use it. So let's look at the timing and some of the areas of contribution when it comes to USAID missions. So clearly missions can use the Youth Compass, we believe, to inform activity design. They can also use it to inform activity management, to make strategic or resource decisions, or they can use it as program guidance for parallel or standalone activities in their portfolio. The ideal timing for missions, we believe, is early in the activity design effort. You see that kind of red dotted line around there, to inform such things as the PAD, for example, an RFA, an RFP, a solicitation, right? That's where we feel you can get the best bang for your buck within the USAID missions. Looking at the next one, when implementing partners, they can also use the Youth Compass to support proposal design, annual work plans, M&E plans, or as a potential midterm or final evaluation. One thing that I forgot to mention with the areas and USAID missions is sometimes in our field we see that the beneficiaries, for example, on youth projects are not well defined, or we're not exactly clear about who the beneficiaries are and where they're going to be located. And sometimes it's up to us just to make that happen, to figure that out. So again, going through something like this beneficiary area, the first area in our conceptual framework, going through that exercise at either the mission level or the implementer level can really be a useful exercise to really bring clarity to who we're working with and for, and where we're working with them, at. So again, while we believe the Youth Compass for implementing partners can be implemented in a number of stages, be it solicitation, first year, middle years, final year, we feel that the first 90 days, even though things may not be completely clear, is where you can really adjust and use these strengthening actions to really get the biggest bang again for your buck. Always, the earlier the intervention in these activities, the more time you have to implement them, and the more impact and effect they can have on achievement of results. Another point I wanted to bring up with respect to the duration of the Youth Compass. Many folks have asked, well, how long does the Youth Compass take to implement? What's the timeline for implementation? And my response to that is really, it depends on the needs and the resources of who's using it. So for example, it can be used as a rapid internal exercise for staff. Maybe that takes a day to 5 days, or it can be used more rigorously and involve a group of partners and stakeholders. And that would therefore require more time, maybe 5 to 15 days. But whatever the emphasis, whatever the purpose, we've designed this tool to require minimal human and financial resources. Again, off the shelf and easily implementable. Okay, at this point I'd like to turn it over to Jess. Thanks very much, and I look forward to hearing some questions from you all as we finish.
Thank you very much, Ramon. I'd now like to provide just a quick overview of how to actually implement the Compass Guide. So when the guide was piloted in Jordan and Indonesia, we soon realized that we needed to provide a little bit more guidance on how implementers could actually start preparing to use the guide. So that being said, we developed a Getting Started section. The first step that we kind of highlight in preparing to use the guide is to mobilize your Youth Compass team. And there are 2 types of teams outlined in the guide. The first team really consists of implementing partners only, which will allow for a more rapid assessment, but really does not promote broader participation and ownership of the activity. The second team that we highlight is an integrated team, which includes implementing partners, youth, and other key stakeholders like local partners and USAID staff. And this will probably take more time to mobilize and coordinate, but it will allow for deeper insights and ownership among all stakeholders, including youth, and hopefully produce activity champions. Throughout the guide, as you can see on this slide, we've also included tip boxes. The tip box on this particular slide really highlights the importance of engaging youth throughout the process of implementing the Youth Compass. And we've highlighted here opportunities to do so. So I'd like to just quickly read off the first 3 bullets in the tip box. So really, in terms of engaging youth in the Compass process, you want to understand the purpose. Begin with a clear idea of why and how you want to engage youth, and know what the benefits will be for youth and for implementing partners. Second is recruitment. Select youth who are connected to the activity, who will carry the activity through, and aim for diversity, ensuring that you include youth, that you are gender diverse, age diverse, education and diversity in socioeconomic status, and also include underserved groups, for example, youth with disabilities and ethnic minorities. Third, you want to ensure that youth are empowered. So before implementing the Youth Compass, provide an orientation for youth members on the team and ask where and how they can best contribute. And we've also included an annex dedicated to how to engage youth, and other resources on how you can do that as well. And that is in our Annex C. And we see that oftentimes youth are only engaged during one stage of an activity cycle, but it's really important to engage youth as partners and beneficiaries across the entire activity cycle. This will give them a voice and ownership, as well as build their own capacity. The next steps in preparing to use the Compass Guide after your team is mobilized is to develop a clear statement of work. And this will help facilitate a successful Compass experience. So we have provided a statement of work template, which consists of 4 short sections. The first section briefly is understanding the purpose. Why do you want to use the Youth Compass Guide, and what do you hope to get out of it? Second is a team composition, which I just spoke about earlier. Who will be part of the team? Is it only implementing partners, or is it an integrated team? And what are the roles and responsibilities of each individual? Third, defining the geographic scope. So what geographic areas will the Compass focus on? This will be entirely dependent on the needs and scope of the activity. As Ramon mentioned in task 1, really framing what you'd like to focus on depending on the activity results. And finally, what is the timeline and level of effort? When will you implement the Youth Compass, and approximately how many work days do you think it will take based on resources available, including financial and human resources? So once you have developed that clear statement of work and the Youth Compass team has been mobilized, we have provided a Youth Compass template, which you can download in our Annex A of the guide. And then finally, when you do get started, we recommend reviewing our Chapter 3 case study. And the case study, we've drafted a fictional activity and provided sample responses on how the team can respond to directions and questions under each task. And the case study does encompass a cross-sectoral, positive youth development, and gender elements within it. So one of the key learning objectives of today's webinar is to also demonstrate how flexible and adaptable the guide can be to multiple development scenarios, not just your traditional youth sectors like health, education, and economic growth. For example, in the guide, we have provided different responses to different contexts, including post-conflict context, preventing and countering violent extremism, and humanitarian context. So if you are adapting the Youth Compass, the only task that really needs to be tailored is our task 2, which is where you are analyzing the activity. And this is where the team can edit and add their own key questions. So for example, in this slide, we have provided some illustrative questions in our Annex D on how to tailor the Compass Guide. And I'll just share a couple questions. The first example is under post-conflict task 2 questions. Let's look at our Area 1 beneficiaries. And we ask a question that addresses the beneficiaries' assets and needs. So, and how we tailored it, we asked, given the post-traumatic effects of conflict, would the beneficiaries benefit from psychosocial support? So let's take a look at the illustrative question under PCV Task 2 questions. And let's look at Area 4, Gender Equality and Social Inclusion. We ask a question that addresses masculinity. The question reads, how do perceptions of masculinity influence young men's participation in violent extremism? So those are only a few examples of how you can tailor Task 2 to your development context and your activity needs. So finally, to summarize some key points that Ramon and I have touched upon, I just want to reiterate, the value added that the Youth Compass provides to really help implementers strengthen the activity. First, the guide is very flexible. As Ramon mentioned, it can be used across all stages of an activity cycle to inform design, adapt and/or strengthen implementation, and provide lessons learned that can feed into future activities. And not only is it flexible in terms of timing, it's also flexible in terms of your target beneficiaries. And by that I mean the activity or the compass can be used for activities where youth are primary beneficiaries, where they are partial beneficiaries, or where they are indirect beneficiaries. And as I just mentioned, the tool is flexible and adaptable to diverse development scenarios like post-conflict, CVE, and humanitarian assistance. Second, the guide is more than an assessment tool. It really facilitates a strategic process that fosters collaboration, learning, and adaptation. And we really emphasize the importance of engaging youth and other stakeholders, including USAID staff, if possible. Third, it is results-driven. So the Compass implementation begins with and is driven by the activity results in Task 1. And as I mentioned, another important characteristic of the guide is that it does emphasize the importance of engaging youth, and we do provide additional resources on how to do so. Fifth, the Compass validates the initial activity design or helps identify gaps that need to be addressed to help strengthen the activity to achieve results. And finally, it is a complementary guide that informs the activity's annual work plan and M&E plan. And as Ramon mentioned earlier, all the strengthening actions that are developed should be integrated into existing plans. So the outputs of the guide or of using the Youth Compass will be integrated into what's already required within the contract. You are not creating a standalone plan. So now I'd like to introduce our special guest, Fadwa Abdul Kader, who will share the experience of the Youth Power Jordan team, and they piloted an earlier draft of the Youth Compass Guide. And because of their experience and recommendations, we were really able to strengthen the guide to what it is today. So many thanks again to the Youth Power Jordan pilot team, and Fadwa, I'd like to hand it over to you.
Thank you, Jess. Thank you, Raymond, for this introduction. Well, good morning and good evening from Jordan, from USAID Youth Power. And Shababuna Quwa is our name of the program in Arabic, which means our youth is our power. So we were introduced to the Youth Compass at the beginning of the program in the first 6 months of Youth Power Jordan. And at that time, we used the compass to maximize the positive effects on youth stakeholders and facilitate achievement of the results. And the second one was to help identify actions for strengthening YP activity in Jordan, to prioritize those actions and facilitate a plan for incorporating them into the YP programming. What we have liked about using the compass, as Jessica mentioned a few minutes ago, that it had those case studies. Actually, the case studies that were included in the guide of the compass helped the Jordan team to work on better answers for the areas, especially in task 2. And also we felt that this is really unique tool that helped us to shift from the traditional focus on youth programming to other one that is strengthening our youth activities as they are being implemented. The stage where the Compass was implemented, it was in the first 6 months of the Youth Power Jordan implementation. One of the key examples of the strengthening the action for the Youth Compass was the assess or verify what mapped communities truly represent the beneficiary group within this activity. When we started the Compass, we didn't have yet our communities selected at that time, nor we have our youth beneficiaries were not ready also at that time. So after using the Compass, one of the key actions that came out, it helped us in do the community profiling for our communities, which were then followed by introductory meetings with community key officials. And then this helped us to do the developing the registration forms for our youth who were able later to register into our program and to see whom are really our beneficiaries. One of the results that has really been an impact, we liked also, is the standardization of the definitions per the national and official definition throughout the whole activity. So, as a result of undertaking the Youth Compass, we have standardized the definitions of key terms, which were then used later on research process. We used later for the community selection process. This includes, but not limited to the definitions of the youth and poverty rate and school dropouts, which were at that time and still was the community selection criteria we followed to select our communities in the program. And then for our thoughts on the Youth Compass, it was really helpful implementing the Youth Compass at Youth Power Jordan. Also, we felt that it helped us to make the positive youth development and gender equality to come alive. And also, if we have time at that time for the implementation of the Compass to involve youth and partners and stakeholders, we would have done that. But since at that time we still didn't have our communities defined nor our beneficiaries, we had only the chance to pilot the Compass with our partners, part of them, and the local staff working in the program. So the timing, it needs having only like a couple of weeks or 3 weeks to implement the Compass is good, but we felt that if we had like a longer time, it would be great. And also the timing, if we have also the luxury to do the piloting of the Compass in the second year, we would have maybe broader findings that reflect what really youth power needs to do later. And finally, tailoring and prioritizing the questions in task 2, something that really needs to be taken into consideration as the guided analysis of the activity via the Compass 4 strategic areas. This is task 2. And the key questions are provided under each strategic area will define in the later stages how you are going to implement the Compass, because it's, let's say, the biggest chunk of questions lie there. So you tailor the questions there and move it to other tasks in the Compass tool. And thank you all for your listening.
Great. Thank you so much, Fadwa, for your reflections on your experience with Compass. We now want to move to questions from our listeners. And we will start with, we see a number of questions relating to different ways to use the Compass. The first one asks, how does the tool add or complement an adaptive management process like USAID's CLA process?
Yeah, this is Ramon. I think it's a good question. By the way, those of you who are listening, feel free to start typing in questions as you feel the need. You know, we believe, we understand the importance of CLA as defined, by PPL and USAID, and the importance of carrying these processes out to really to achieve, effectiveness and I think achievement of results. So, I mean, without being too simplistic, we really do believe that, the way that the Compass process, the strategic process is formulated really embodies collaboration, learning, and adaptation in a way, of course, that's directed at, achieving results. So, if I'm understanding the question, adaptive management, I mean, that's all embodied in the strengthening actions. So, if you're looking at an implementer who's, a year out or a year and a half out from, within the implementation of a youth activity, and they conduct the Compass, that's exactly what those strengthening actions are looking to yield. Some level of adaptation, some level of change or strengthening that will improve the journey toward those results.
Great, thank you, Ramon. The next question also relates to other uses for the Youth Compass, and this focuses on how the Youth Compass can help create or modify theories of change for a full program, since the Youth Compass seems to be focused at the activity level.
Yeah, Jess, by all means chime in. Jess is virtual and I'm live here, but by all means chime in, Jess. And if you have any questions for Fadwa on her pilot as well, by all means feel free to ask those as well. You're right in one sense that there is a focus under task 2 on activities, and again, when we refer to activities, we're referring to kind of what we used to refer to as projects or programs, but that is where the emphasis is. We believe it would not be too far of a tailor, too difficult of a tailor to ask questions under our 4 areas regarding beneficiaries, regarding enabling environment, the context, regarding youth empowerment and participation, and regarding gender, to ask the right questions to kind of support or develop, if you're in the USAID mission, right, a theory of change and a corresponding results framework. We don't necessarily feel that it's the implementers, maybe to reflect on the theory of change, but hopefully by the time that the implementers are implementing this activity, they have received an RFA or an RFP that is pretty clear with its theory of change or results, and if not, certainly at the early stages has been clarified with the mission. So again, we don't feel it's too tough of a tailor, and we feel that the conceptual framework offers the right areas to tailor questions that will yield such information, to give you results, to give you priorities that will help craft that theory of change.
Thanks, Ramon. Let's go to another question about where else have we implemented the Compass?
That's a great question. Unfortunately, Jess, do you want to take this?
Yeah, we have only implemented or piloted, I should say, in Indonesia with RTI. So Indonesia and Jordan were part of our 2 pilots, and what we're hoping is to actually implement it and yield some lessons learned so that we can, have more evidence. But the results of both pilots were very positive, and it did really help strengthen the tool. And Ramon, I don't know if you want to add.
Yeah, Fadwa, well, before I do that, Fadwa, do you have anything to add in terms of, I know you had already spoken about your recommendations, just kind of off the cuff, anything more about, did you, maybe at first, did you all feel that the Compass was a little burdensome? Why do we have to do this? And how did you all feel after that was done? Did you really feel like it added the value that you had hoped for?
Yeah, thank you, Raymond. Yeah, actually, we asked this question, no, why do we have to do this? But after implementing the compass in Jordan, it really opened our eyes on specific areas that were not heavily discussed throughout the program because it was in the first 6 months. And maybe we were not looking to some areas that were really very gender specific or very sensitive to issues that we might face later in the field. So when we put some key actions for moving forward with the program, and then we saw ourselves doing this, and wow, this is great that the compass helped us at least put some clear agenda or clear guidelines for our work as well and clear plan to implement the program. So this was really helpful for us, Raymond.
I wanted to ask one of the things the compass has been used by 2 youth-focused programs, but the compass can also be quite useful for projects that are youth inclusive but may not have youth as the primary beneficiary group. And I understand the compass was shared with other projects in Jordan, and we found that they actually some of those projects that were not youth focused but youth inclusive particularly appreciated having this tool to help them see a new lens of looking at their youth population.
Fadwa, do you have any comments on that? You know that situation. I mean, when we oriented Youth Power, Jordan, and some of the other corresponding projects, there was, Kristen's absolutely right, there was a level of enthusiasm. Did anything manifest from that, and was that taken forward at all in any way by any of the other projects to the best of your knowledge?
To the best of my knowledge, no. I don't know if it has been implemented by other programs who are not focusing on youth. But for us, because we are youth-focused program, we had it. But I don't know about other programs.
Right. I think IRI was also was involved. Anyway, but what I would like to say in response to that question is, 2 things. One is this: it's really kind of hot off the shelves. We've just kind of concluded and finalized the Youth Compass based on these 2 pilots, really in January. So it's a pretty new tool. And 2, that we unfortunately, we don't have the resources to pilot it further or test it further per se. But what we are totally willing to do is any implementer or any USAID mission that has an interest. I mean, we're willing to spend our time to best orient, to best set up, to best guide the use of it to ensure utility and success. So that's our commitment to the youth field and to this tool that we feel is quite simple but also quite valuable.
And that's a wonderful offer, Ramon, and we really appreciate, MSI has done this task under Youth Power Action, completed its task in terms of developing and piloting the tool, and this offer to help implementers use it and get guidance is a wonderful offer. I hope people can take advantage of it. I see there's a question there about whether or not the implementation of the Youth Compass has yielded lessons learned and standards around youth program design and implementation, such as identifying what type of physical spaces would be needed to make youth activities more gender neutral. And I know we've only piloted in 2 locations, so I think it's early to be able to have that kind of results. And Youth Power is there for the compass is there for anyone to use it. Ramon, do you have any thoughts, or Jess, about what kind of data we could get out of Youth Compass that could feed back into some kinds of standards or lessons learned?
Thank you, Kristen, and that's a great question. Thanks to whoever offered it up. Fadwa, I'd like to just kick this back to you. You being the gender specialist in Youth Power, from a gender perspective, did you feel that the use of the Youth Compass yielded considerations and reflections, and then further lessons or strengthening actions regarding gender and inclusivity? How did you feel from your perspective about that? Did we lose Fadwa? Wait, I'm sorry, we're having just a bit of technical difficulty. We'll make sure to Let's see here if we can bring her back. Fadwa, are
Can
you
you
back?
hear me now?
Yes. Did you hear the question?
Parts of it. Can you please repeat?
Yeah, somebody asked, a good question was asked about lessons learned, particularly with respect to gender and inclusivity, by using the compass. And I was just curious, from your perspective as a gender, lead, a gender champion for Youth Power, what is your perspective on that and using it?
Yes, sure. Actually, just a second. All right. Yeah, for the gender, actually, one of the answers that came on the gender areas here in Jordan about it has to do the community dialogue, which to include youth, young males and females, and parents. And when we looked back into our gender activities, this opened our eyes to do more inclusive social dialogue activities, not only for our youth, but as well as for the communities, for the local communities, especially when we are talking about taboo topics or some controversial topics that might not be well accepted in far communities distant from the capital Amman. So the Compass helped us as well to tailor some social dialogue activities that will be implemented in the second year of the program.
And it sounds like it also maybe broadened your perspective about who and how gender inclusive efforts should be directed to. Is that true?
Yes, this is true. The gender inclusivity يعني became more clearer after doing the Compass.
Mm. So and yeah, in terms of the bigger picture, as Kristen said, we don't yet have enough evidence behind implementation of the Youth Compass to talk about that. But in the spirit of CLA, I think it should be up to us to make sure as best as we can to track some of these higher level lessons and feed them back to the implementing and mission communities.
Yes, sure. I totally agree.
So we have a question here about whether or not, what type of prior USAID assessment tools were used when we were first developing the Compass.
Yeah, that's a great question. One thing USAID is not short on are tools, right? I mean, there's plenty of tools and plenty of analysis frameworks, across USAID, and that just shows the rigor under which USAID likes to operate. And that's not meant to be a stab, but rather a compliment. Principally, and as I said in the presentation, we use the Equip 3 guide to cross-sectoral youth assessments. That was one of the major pieces that we used, and there was a lot of good lessons and a lot of good, they really set the bar strongly there. I believe that was Education Development Center under Equip 3 that created that. And then the other was the Youth Map. There was a guide called the Youth Map that I believe IYF under a subcontract from USAID also developed, which also provided a lot of really good framing for it. But beyond that, we kind of expanded our literature review further out and looked at other tools and other good ways to frame kind of conceptualize the tool. And one of the other kind of tools that was critical and is also part of linked into our Youth Compass is MSI Scaling Up management tool, which also similarly frames the steps and the tasks as kind of a guiding conceptual framework. So, like I said, lots of tools were looked at, but and then also one thing I didn't mention is USAID required, rightly so, that in the design phase of this that we gathered together a number of implementers, and we had at least two, one at the beginning and one towards the end, pretty significant workshops where just ideas were brainstormed and recommendations were put forward on how to kind of put forward this next generation of assessment tool that USAID was asking for.
That feeds nicely into the question about how is this tool different from other USAID youth tools? What's unique and what is the significant value add of the compass compared to other tools?
Yeah, I would say that that it goes beyond assessment. You know, it's a facilitated process that goes beyond just analyzing, you know, a particular set of beneficiaries or partners, stakeholders in the case of youth. I mean, it goes way beyond an assessment. It's extremely adaptable. It's user friendly. And we really do believe it can be utilized in a broad number of contexts with very minimal adaptation. You know, remember that slide that Jess discussed about the flexibility, all of these different areas. We really do believe that that's the value add of the tool. It's not a perfect tool. I don't believe any tool is, but we certainly, we've really worked hard to go beyond the assessment into this, facilitating those strengthening actions, and then really bringing to the attention of whoever's using it that these really need to be integrated into what you're already doing, not create, more work for you, not create more effort for what's already going on. Goodness knows there's a lot of responsibilities and efforts going on within a USAID design process or a USAID implementation process, and we're not looking to have this tool be something that's burdensome or cumbersome, but rather complementary.
Yeah, I also state that something like the free cross-sectoral youth assessment tool was really designed for a pre-project phase and help at that larger level of what USAID should be doing, whereas this one's really at that post-implementation project.
Please.
Also, one point. Actually, while doing the assessment tool and while answering the questions, when we were getting back to the case studies helped us to understand the case properly and also to find relevant answers that are similar or that are relevant to our case. So when you understand the unique thing about the assessment tool or the compass tool at that time, we found that the case studies helped us a lot to understand more about our program as well as the tool. So for us, it is the case studies that were unique.
Thank you, Fadwa. Just to clarify, I just wanted to say that what Fadwa is referring to is our chapter 3 in the guide. Just to make sure everyone's on the same page, we have kind of a getting started section, then we have the exercise section, which is chapter 2, and then chapter 3 is a case study where we take an illustrative example of a fictitious USAID project and bring it all the way through a compass process from task 1 all the way to task 7. So that's kind of what Fadwa is referring to, and we've done that specifically to kind of guide folks in how to best use the compass.
So I also just want to kind of emphasize, the importance of the conceptual framework of this tool. It does emphasize positive youth development a lot, and one of the tools we forgot to mention that helped us in developing this guide is the PYD measurements toolkit. So we also included parts of that in the guide, and then really the emphasis on cross-sectoral coordination. Oftentimes when you work in a particular sector, you don't necessarily see all the linkages and opportunities and how working across sectors can really support achievement of results and hopefully sustain after the activity has ended. So that cuts across the entire tool as well, and then the emphasis on gender equality. So those 3 approaches combined really kind of give a more holistic approach to design and implementation that can, help draw things that maybe were not seen before when a proposal was submitted. And also if you are using it as a substitute to a midterm evaluation or whatnot, it really does help you identify these strengthening actions and adapt in the activity as you
Jess, thank you for that. This is Ramon. Thank you for that. That totally slipped my mind, and it's extremely important. And frankly, if there's anything that influenced our youth compass, it's the positive youth development approach and that M&E guide developed under Youth Power Learning. So very, very important. And actually, the four areas and the definitions within them were significantly influenced by the positive youth development approach and its definition. So thank you for reminding all of us, Jess. Appreciate that.
And as you look at that part of the compass where you've got the very specific questions about positive youth development, it encourages you to think about who are influencing young people, how are young people perceived in their community, what opportunities do young people have to express their voice and contribute at a larger level in the community. So it facilitates asking those questions that leads you to a positive youth development approach. So that is one of the unique features of the compass. I think we have just time for one last question. I see that there was a question here about how do you orient the adults to partner with and work with youth in this process?
Wow, that's a really great question that I think we could ask ourselves all the time, including us adults that work with young people. While there's not step-by-step guidance in the guide on things that adults should take into consideration, there are resources that we have that point to how to engage young people in a positive, productive, and empowering manner. And as we said, the annex that we have also elaborates further from that tip box that we saw when we're comprising the youth compass teams. We feel that right there and right then, when there's intent to conduct a youth compass effort, that is when we should consider young people and bring them on at the earliest stage possible to become a partner. And that's just not lip service. I've actually practiced this in a lot of the work that I've done across my career with USAID and other agencies. But in terms of beyond the framing, making sure that we understand their needs, making sure they're clear, making sure they're supported, making sure that there's space to contribute across the Youth Compass effort, and making sure there's space to contribute beyond the Youth Compass effort. Kind of dominoing that into further champions for the activity, if you will. Beyond that, there's not any step-by-step guidance, but we are hoping that if it is a youth activity, that the adults that are involved with that youth activity will at some level have an idea on how to engage and work with youth. But you know what? Sometimes assumptions are dangerous, and maybe your question can be impetus for a second edition where we bring in a little bit more emphasis to empower adults to best work with youth. So that's a great question.
Yeah, the Compass does provide some guidance
Yes.
on how you could do youth engagement through the Compass process.
That's right.
So it does provide some tips on doing youth engagement as you implement Compass.
Yeah. Jess, do you have anything to add to that? Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, as some of the commenters said, we all know that this is one of the most important things, is really helping adults bring young people into the process throughout all stages of the program. And so we know that is one of the most important strategies that we should be implementing in our youth programs.
Yeah, and we agree with that comment, and that's we really tried our level best within the space we had to develop this tool to ensure that we devoted, real estate, if you will, we devoted space and time to engaging, to empowering Youth Compass users to engage and to mobilize, engage, and empower young people through this process. And it works. We have experience in doing it. It's just a question of intent and taking the time to do so and planning out the best way to do it. So thank you very much.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Ramon, Jess, and Todd. I want to thank you to Youth Power Learning for this opportunity to share the Compass more broadly. You'll see on the slide the ways to get in touch with our colleagues who develop Youth Compass, and we all look forward to hearing how Compass has helped you improve the quality of youth programming. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.